Hey everybody, welcome back to the Made for the Range podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, welcome. We are at SeeMore headquarters here, just outside of Nashville, Tennessee. Are we in Brentwood, technically?
I think we were right on the border of Brentwood and Franklin. This is a Franklin address. But
okay,
yeah.
All right. So
Franklin
we're right on
is kind of an old historic town.
Got it. Okay, so we're just outside of Nashville, though. I'm here with Jim, who is the CEO of SeeMore currently. We're going to sit down and talk about, I want to talk about you a lot, first off, but then also get into some of the SeeMore stuff. I have some geeky questions to ask just because of the current landscape of the putter market.
Okay.
I think is very interesting, and I think there's a part of SeeMore that maybe isn't discussed enough or told enough. So hopefully we'll get into a little bit of that. But yeah, just give us a quick introduction to yourself. Just, how long have you been in golf? Why did you start in golf? And then I'll take it from there.
Sounds good. Real quick, I actually became a golf sales rep for Wilson Sporting Goods.
Okay.
Right out of college. That was back in 1984.
Perfect.
And I'd gone to school at Stanford, and they had a management training program at Wilson. Wilson was part of a big conglomerate. It was actually part of Pepsi.
Yeah.
And so my checks came from Pepsi, and they were like, this is a training program. But I'm like, wow, okay, sports. I love sports, all sports. Had played high school golf. Not very good. I think I shot a 39 one time
there
for
you
9
go.
holes.
Yeah.
So
that's good for high school golf. Yeah, absolutely.
Put a lot more focus on basketball, but it was fun. So I had a chance all of a sudden out of school to go rep a territory for Wilson, and I did that for a couple of years on the West Coast, which was fantastic. That's where I had gone to college, and then had a chance to go back to Chicago, my hometown, and work for their headquarters.
Okay.
And travel the world for 4 years. I was sort of over export markets. So and that was more than just golf. That was golf, tennis, baseball, everything.
Yeah.
Travel the world over and over and over for 4 years, and then I got into product development and what have you. And then after about 10 years at Wilson, I got an opportunity to go to San Diego to work in product marketing for TaylorMade, and we launched something called the Burner Bubble Shaft while I was at TaylorMade.
Okay, that's awesome.
And then I actually left to join a small group that had started a putter company, Odyssey. And so, and then I ended up being there for about 6-7 years.
Wow.
Started off over sales, and then by the end, we were acquired by Callaway, and so I was actually the general manager of the Odyssey division for Callaway until about 2000, and that was, the company went from a small market share to a dominant market share during that period of time, and then I left to move to Nashville, Tennessee, to head up worldwide sales and marketing for Gibson Guitar Company.
Oh,
here
big
in
shift,
Nashville.
yeah, big shift. Okay.
Which is funny because it's a it's a aspirational brand, and people that really love expensive toys, very similar to the golf business and collecting guitars and what have you. So brought me to Nashville, brought our family here to Nashville, great place to raise a family. So I've been in Nashville for 25 years, and 6 years after coming here to work for Gibson, I had an opportunity to go back and do something with a guy that I was very close with. We worked together at Odyssey. His name is Jason Poliot, and he ran sales at Odyssey. When I had taken a bump up to sort of be the GM, and we worked great together. And we kind of decided our non-competes were over, and so we kind of asked, "Is there anything we can do? Any way to get back into the golf business?"
Yeah, sure.
We were sort of putter guys at that point in time, and we started doing some research, and starting a brand new brand, we know how difficult that can be. Coming up with the right product, it's 1 in 1,000, right? And then we stumbled across SeeMore. We didn't really stumble across. We remembered Payne Stewart's performance in 1999, and it was still probably, it still probably is one of the greatest putting performances in the history of major championships.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we looked at the product, the putter that he had, that SeeMore putter. It was so simple yet so effective, and it was very differentiated. The 2 white sight lines, the red dot, you hide it, you use kind of a rifle scope sort of technology. So that checked all the boxes in terms of, if you're going to start a company or you're going to start marketing a brand, you want to have something that's highly differentiated. And we looked at that product and we said, what happened to it? We did our research. We found out that the company had kind of gone into mothballs after Payne Stewart's tragedy. The guys that were running it didn't really know how to manage through that, and they got involved in another business that was not even golf related, and so they just didn't put any focus on SeeMore.
Sure.
we started doing some research, and we found out that there were two young players on the PGA Tour that had worked their way up from the mini tours on the backs of great putting with SeeMore putters.
Yeah.
And it was Zach Johnson and Vaughn Taylor.
Yeah.
And we found out that there's a guy named Pat O'Brien who was their putting instructor. He actually started off as the SeeMore rep on the mini tours. He just kind of created that job for himself because he was friends with Payne Stewart, and he knew how Payne Stewart had used the SeeMore putter to go from a streaky putter, but average in terms of statistically, to the best putter on tour. He in 1999, not only did he win the U.S. Open with SeeMore putter, but he actually was. There were two main putting categories back at the time. He finished first in one of them and second in the other one. So overall, the best putter on tour the one year that he used the SeeMore putter. And Pat thought there was something there. He took it to the mini tours. Zach Johnson and Vaughn Taylor kind of loved Payne Stewart and what he represented, and they also saw the benefits from Pat of the SeeMore putter. It's sort of a putter, but it's also a training aid, and it's something that you can go back to. It also, and I think I know what you're talking about here 25 years later, with the trends being now towards another thing is about putter design is simplifying the design and having the putter, let the dynamics of the putter sort of swing itself back to square. That's what the original SeeMore putter also did.
Yeah, it's crazy to talk about that because you look at the putter that Payne Stewart used, and that putter was built off of a design principle of, maybe not called zero torque at the time or even now, but definitely significantly reducing the effects of torque, I guess is the political way to say it. But it's crazy now because we see trends all the time, right? Like especially with putters, when something hits hot on tour or something happens for an important guy on tour at an important event, there's a big swarm to that thing, whether it's other companies jumping on board and doing something similar, whether it's shapes becoming more popular or an idea or a build, there's no hiding the counterbalance jailbird that took over for a year and a half or whatever it was. It's crazy how that stuff works and how most of the time at some point it's going to come back, and it just goes into, are you able to market the thing that makes you special? And I think you saying that coming into SeeMore, you saw an opportunity to take a really great product with a very, very unique attribute and market it better, right? Because at the end of the day, we still have to sell things. We still have to sell putters. So how do you market that? How do you get people interested in it? And I was just talking to Alex, who's behind the cameras, but I was just talking to Alex in the build shop of, I'm not a center shafted guy because of aim. And every time I've picked up a SeeMore, I always go and this is so easy to aim because there's zero doubt in your head. If you have that red dot covered, you're done, right? It is square to whatever now, if your path is not correct, that's on you. But just with any other putter, if you can't read a green, you're not gonna putt well. But it's crazy because the way it's talked about and maybe the way things are marketed, it's just so interesting to see something that in 1999 won a major championship on the same design basis as what's now super trendy and super popular.
And obviously, in one way, that makes us very proud and grateful that the business has finally come the direction that we thought it should have come. It's tough fighting a battle by yourself. I mean, one of the biggest challenges we had, of course, Zach Johnson was dominating golf, and he was doing it with great putting. I mean, he's 13 victories on the PGA Tour, 2 major championships using the same putter as Payne Stewart. So it won in '99. It won the Masters in 2007. It won the British Open at St. Andrews in 2015. Same story. And but it's interesting because sometimes in order for something to explode, it needs other competitive activities to buy in. Nobody wants to, so few people want to stand alone, want to be a total nonconformist. And that's kind of what happened for a long time with SeeMore is that you'd go to a golf store and nobody else was buying into it. And yet, if you went to the tour, a lot of times you would have seen players representing those brands that were filling up the pro shops. But they'd have a center shaft version that wasn't even available necessarily to the consumer. So we always thought it was kind of an inside, straight center shaft was sort of an insider's technology, low torque, let the putter, do a lot of the work. And then, as you said, the thing that made our low torque putter the best was it also had a spot that you would set it down and you're set up every time. So you have eliminated variables. And Yeah, funny story. When we were doing the research, right before we bought the brand, we wanted to do some research. So we went and talked to Pat O'Brien, and he gave us a lot of great background on Payne Stewart and Payne Stewart's caddy, Mike Hicks, and how they loved this putter and how they thought this putter was going to, they thought for years and years and years Payne would be winning more majors because he had figured out a way to putt that what he felt was better. And I know at the time we talked to Zach Johnson and Vaughn Taylor after Pat directed us that way. And both of them were concerned at the time that the SeeMore brand was going to sort of go away because, as I mentioned, the guys owned it, had gone on to another business. It was sort of in mothballs. You couldn't really find it.
Yeah.
And those guys, one of those guys said to me, man, we really hope you guys get this brand because we love what you've done with Odyssey, and we love that, this. We think this deserves to be a really good brand. And then they said, but for some reason, if it's not going to happen and if it doesn't work out, can you just make sure that you set some of these things aside for us in a vault so that we always have access to it? And I was like, wow, who has that level of conviction towards a product?
To really care and love their brand that much,
Yeah.
So real quick, I want to reverse or go back just a little bit. So with your time at Odyssey, what did you work on when you were at Odyssey? Like, what was some of the cool stuff you got to do there? Just because I think the connection, and it's funny, I think I don't know how many of these podcasts I've done where somebody was like, yeah, I started working at Odyssey. It's that team, I think, then has become such an influence in golf as the people that worked with you have spread out and are still in golf. Like, I know a lot of those people, and the influence of that team is crazy of what has happened since, those people are no longer. But yeah, so like, what were some of the highlights that you had at Odyssey, and when you were working there, what was some of the cool stuff that you guys got to kind of get through? And obviously you were part of the acquisition in Callaway, so that was a huge deal. And then how did that kind of change things for you guys with Odyssey too? Yeah,
so Odyssey was independent from the early 90s, and I joined in 95 and was still a small brand. I think the revenue was around $3 million a year. And, but poised for explosion. What we had done is we had put really good reps out on tour, and it was a highly differentiated product. And actually, to be honest, at the time, the putter category, I think the average retail for a putter was about $69 for a ping putter. And ping dominated the business.
Yeah, it was ping, yeah.
And it was kind of a market that nobody else went after. The big companies were focused on their drivers and their irons, and so ping just sort of had the putter market to themselves. And I think one of the opportunities that was there for Odyssey is that we launched a new technology, putters that actually, some of them more mallet size. They had this insert which was softer. So it was the right product at the right time, and there was a competitor. I mean, again, Ping's a great company, but I think in terms of the putter market at that particular point in time, they weren't putting a lot of focus towards it. It was just sort of whether they were harvesting the brand or they just sort of left it out there. So it was, in retrospect, wide open for somebody to come in. And another big trend at the time was that golf balls, to go further and further and further, they were actually pretty hard. The two-piece golf balls, were... they didn't have a lot of feel involved, but they went a long ways and they went straight.
Sure.
So people were switching to that golf ball, but now the benefit of the Odyssey insert softened it up. So at the time, the insert was critical.
Yeah.
Nowadays, golf balls are all soft and feel great. And to me, the insert, the rubber insert, is really not as big of a factor these days.
Sure.
But it was back then. And so, and then all of a sudden got, Nick Faldo, wins a major championship, and then Mark Brooks wins a major championship in 1996 using the Odyssey Rossies, which were a mallet, half mallet and a full mallet.
Yeah.
So it was cool, and it was a game changer. And then the next big thing was sort of at the very end of I actually had just left before they launched it, but one of the things that we'd been working on for a long time was this whole two-ball concept. So again, visual alignments, right?
Yeah.
And helping people aim. And then if you fast forward to when we bought SeeMore, we thought, well, one of the benefits of Odyssey was they always had this visual that would help people aim, but we said, but SeeMore's is much more precise. It's sort of precision alignment. And we said, putting is a precise part of the game. You only have a small, a window.
You have a very small window degrees-wise of where you can actually hit a start line. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And the more we looked at it, we realized the beauty of SeeMore is that it helped the golfer align themselves to the ball. As you said, you still have to pick the line, and you'll have to learn your speed.
Yeah.
But you triangulated yourself to the ball, to the cup, and that was one thing that most general alignments, like even a two ball, I'd call it general alignment, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't. You could still have an inconsistent setup and an inconsistent stance.
Sure.
The two balls would help you see where a line was,
Yeah.
but it wasn't necessarily the right line, and it wasn't necessarily one that you were able to execute.
Yeah.
So, it really was, what we learned at Odyssey back in those days was that alignment was important, and the confidence that can come from that. And so when we saw SeeMore, we said, well, this is the next evolution of alignment.
Yeah.
And we actually were told by some university professors about the whole low torque part of it. We didn't actually even know about that when
because
we
it
acquired
wasn't,
the brand.
it was like the rifle scope technology, I think is like almost the tagline of the brand, right? Like it's what the line is, it's see the dot, is it see the dot?
Yeah, hide the red dot.
Hide the dot. Yeah. Well, that would make sense. Yeah, you're hiding it. No, like it's part of the brand, and that was the interesting part of like discovering the low torque. So I have a funny story. I was debating on telling it. I won't name the people in this, but so Lab came out with their reviewer thing, right? Mm-hmm. I remember when I was working at a large club fitter, when they started putting them in stores, the rep came in, had a reviewer, was doing the whole, whatever demonstration, when you don't put your hands on the putter.
Yeah.
And I remember one of my friends at that place grabbed one of the SeeMores and was like, I really think this will work, and put it in the reviewer. It worked perfectly. And he was like, the rep just like basically was beside himself of like, can you just not tell people that? So it's just interesting how how quickly that has become such a force. And for you guys, it's not even the main selling point. Like, it's just a benefit of design. Yeah. The other thing for you guys with the rifle scope, as we look around like behind us and stuff, not everything is center shafted. Right. You guys have the RST hosel.
Yeah, rifle scope technology. Mm-hmm. And then we even have the hosel.
Yeah, so there's the hosel that's more of like a plumber's neck style.
Yeah.
There's bend profile hosels. Like, it's based around the rifle scope. Yeah. And there's just inherent benefits of lowering the effects of torque, which is great. But the biggest problem that I've had I call everything CG shafted putters so that we can stop talking about torque at all. Yeah. So CG shafted putters for me, they're just impossible to aim because of where you have to put that shaft. And to have something that gives you the confidence that above all else, you're square to what you think your target line is so much easier to use. And you just take the benefits of that in your hands. And I think that's where it provides way more benefit to the golfer to know that you're aimed properly versus just the siloing of lowering torque, right? Like, it's an interesting thing.
We agree. I mean, so Lab obviously has now, they've dramatically shifted the market towards a straight center shaft design. Yeah. So as the original brand of straight center shaft, we're looking at that going, great. This actually opens up a window for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But we have to tell our story. They've got a marketing machine going right now. I commend them for that. Yeah. But as you pointed out, there's zero torque, and the way they measure the zero torque without touching a putter, to me, it's just not realistic because you introduce torque when you touch a putter. Now, even with the lightest grip pressure. Okay. Yeah. And so. And I think zero torque, the question is what do you really need zero torque? Do you need this thing to work in a vacuum the way theirs does? And they have some certain designs of the putter. They started by knowing that the revealer was going to be their story, and so they created putters to work in their revealer.
Correct.
Right?
I tell people that all the time.
So it's totally reverse engineered, and it's sort of like, okay, so the rest of us are going to look not as good using their measure, but in reality, I don't think that the word is that zero torque is the best for all players. I think that there's some level of torque, and lower torque for a lot of players is highly beneficial versus higher torque. But there's still some people that are going to actually love to have higher torque because they want to do stuff. So, if there's a continuum, from 0% torque to 100% torque, there's golfers that are going to be fit in different slots in there. Yeah. And so, if you look at the SeeMore putter from the FGP, which is as close to zero torque, but there's a lot of other putters we have are very low torque. They won't work on their revealer, but we do believe that the torque is low enough in most of our putters that once you touch it, it has the benefit of returning the square.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people, they see devices like that, and people have made similar things just for their own brands and stuff, and they see devices like that, and everybody's question is, what happens when you put your hands on the putter? First off, they are showing it in a vacuum, basically, right? But they're showing the technology of the physical aspect of the head just in space. Well, a lot of people don't attribute that back to the putter head is still going to try to move your hands, whether you feel it or not, or whether you believe it or not. The mass of something moving 36 inches below your hands is still going to try to influence your hands. So if we can take some of that movement out or just lower it as much as possible, maybe not zero, it does help the golfer. And I think that's a misconception, like in defensive lab a little bit, and just the zero torqueness in general is it does do something to your hands. I think people trying to say that putting a metal object at 340 to 380 grams, 36 inches below your hands is not going to try to move your hands around is sort of crazy, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't have different types of putter grips. We wouldn't have different lengths. We wouldn't have different head mass. Like all this stuff plays into that factor. Adjustable weights now. And so it's funny to me that there's such a defense to that thing just because it's so easy to explain why it doesn't need to be a detrimental, like it's not just a marketing thing. They market it very, very well.
They do.
But it's not just a marketing thing. Like it is a physical attribute of putters. So the rifle scope technology stuff, first, can you talk about the story behind the development of that? Do you know like when that came about, like what the theory behind that was or how it was started? I'm a firearms person, so if it actually has to do something with that, I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it actually, the original founder was a guy named Jim Weeks, who was a golf pro in California down in San Clemente. And he and his brother actually, they created this for a need. He actually had a mowing accident. He was at a municipal golf course where he wasn't just the head pro, but every once in a while he had to take the lawnmower out there.
Sure.
And so something got in his eye, and he lost the use of one of his eyes.
Oh.
And so he really struggled with any type of perspective in terms of how to align the putter. And so this originally was designed, for that reason, for him to now all of a sudden have a reference point for setting the putter down. And as it turns out, we all, most of us have a dominant eye, but the benefit of this putter is that it will wash out. Whatever your dominant eye is, you'll find the spot, whether you have one eye or two eyes, and whatever the mix is, you'll find a spot with the rifle scope technology where you clearly cover the red dot and see the two white lines. And you know now that you've taken away a lot of variables. You're set up to your putter the same way every time, right? You also know that your face is going to be square. You also know that the loft is actually going to be, as long as you just take the putter back and bring it right back through, you've now got the loft controlled. Whereas one of the problems with forward pressing, which a lot of putters still have forward press, although if you go to the tour, very few top tour players are really still forward pressing these days. But some putters do build in that forward press. The lab builds in some forward press. And forward press, unfortunately, you start to mess with it.
You're really manipulating loft.
And just if you're off a little bit in your press, you now dramatically change the loft as well. And going back to Payne Stewart, that was one of the main issues that he had to resolve was he couldn't keep his hands in the same place with his forward press. And his caddy would say, Payne, how are you going to make putts when every single time you putt, you've changed the effective loft and even to some cases the face angle of the putter. And so the SeeMore putter was just like fell into his lap and it was different looking. Payne, like everybody else, said, well, wow, I've never seen anything like this. Why would I use something so simple looking? And then he went out and worked with it, and he won actually the very first week that he put it in play, which was at Pebble Beach earlier in the year of 1999. But his caddy, Mike Hicks, tells me that they just worked on, it was a process because he was used to forward pressing. And so, again, nothing in golf is as simple as you just pick it up and it's going to work to its optimal. But the cool thing about SeeMore's alignment system is over time, it works almost subliminally on you, and it becomes second nature. And pretty soon you don't even have to think about it or worry about it, and you can really focus on the other stuff. Whereas the other guys are still trying to figure out where their hands should be and whether, So even some of the straight center shaft, low torque putters out there right now still create a confusing alignment system.
Absolutely. No, that's what I've experienced as I've tried to test, most of them, and I've gone through as many as I can and tried to give people the right information. It's a lot of times they're so hard for me to cover just because I don't putt well with them, so I always feel bad, and like I'm just trying to make sure that I'm talking about them and the technology behind them correctly without saying like it's just not the putter for me, right? It's just not what's going to put the ball in the hole for me. But my introduction to SeeMore was a buddy of mine when I worked at that fitter, who's a lefty actually. He had, I believe at the time, the rep gave him a custom one. But it was the more plumber's neck style hosel, and I remember using his putter. Again, I'm not a lefty. I remember using his putter and putting really well with it. I'm like, what is going on here? Like, this doesn't make any sense. And he went through like the rifle scope stuff. And one of his points actually was face angle. He's like, I don't have to worry about where the face is. He's like, I'm assuming what square is to the target that I define, but then it doesn't change. He's like, I know I am square as long as I don't completely mess up my hands through the putting stroke. He's like, so whether you're lefty or righty, your eyes are just covering that. You see the lines. Everything is set up how the putter is supposed to be set up for you, and you just make a putting stroke. And when he said that, and then when I started hitting more putts with his left-handed, I was like, this is actually kind of incredible. Like, this is so cool that it's so easy. And I even said to him at the time, I was like, it's almost as if this thing is a training aid. Like, it's right on the border of, I could see somebody switching or having something of a similar style maybe or something like that, and using the SeeMore as their comfort or like their go back to, just to make sure that they know what the face is supposed to look like when it's square and at the proper loft and at the proper face angle, so that whatever shape or similar thing they're using, maybe the SeeMore is when the wheels fall off, they're going to go back to the SeeMore and use it, just because it provides so much confidence when you look down at it and you know for a fact that you have it in the right spot.
And you bring up a really interesting point because, well, first of all, the funny story about the lefty-righty thing, I mean, way back when at a Players' Championship, I remember being down there on the putting green. This was probably 2008 or 2009. Zach Johnson had won a major and, was doing great in Ryder Cups and all that kind of stuff. And I remember Sergio Garcia, who never actually put our putter in play, but it was a Wednesday afternoon. He was just having fun. He came over. He started making everything right-handed. And then I had a left-handed version of the putter that he started making, and he turned around and he started making everything. And he turned around and he said, this is so easy. You know? And it was like, again, I'm like, okay, well, are you going to put it in play?
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Yeah, right. You're like, you just sold yourself on it.
I know. So it was one of those moments. But we've also seen many situations where tour players will go out and just use our putter to get themselves realigned in terms of get their stroke down. And honestly, it doesn't even matter what other type of putter that they have, because when you hide the red dot and you let the putter swing itself, it helps you get back to what the perfect swing should be.
Yeah.
Whether you want to be adding the torque or whether you want the putter to do it. And so we've seen all kinds of situations. I mean, this, again, I can't take much credit for this, except that a couple of years ago, or a year and a half ago, I had a caddy come up to me at an LPGA event and said, I just can't believe you're here. I've been looking for you because my player really needs to recalibrate her aim and her alignment. And I've told her about this putter, and we got to get one of these putters so she can work with it.
Yeah.
And so I just said, well, great. I said, who's your player? And again, because this is the first time I've been on the LPGA tour, I was an idiot. I said, who's your player? It was Nelly Korda, okay? And she hadn't won in quite a while.
Yeah.
And she won that week, and she won the next 5 events.
I was saying, then she did her,
and I mean, how often she trained with it, I don't know. But I know that I made 2 of them. And the caddy, I guess, is sort of a swing coach for her as well, or a putting coach. Anyway,
her team is very close.
But we've seen that happen over and over and over, where there's sort of a rub-off effect, okay?
Yeah.
And so even if you buy a SeeMore putter, as you're happy with your gamer, this is a great training aid.
Yeah.
And someday you'll realize, hey, I can take that onto the golf course and use it as well.
Yeah.
So most players use it as their gamers, but there are some players that are married to something else, and yet they know that the benefits of hiding the red dot, we don't propose that you hide the red dot throughout the stroke. We don't want you watching the head of the putter.
Yeah.
But if you step aside and you just want to practice your stroke, the red dot is hidden at all times during the perfect pendulum putting stroke.
Yeah. Have you guys seen any imitations at any point? Like, I know on tours especially, there's a lot of times on tour where, because they're not selling the product, they're not marketing the product, but all of a sudden you see some other brand has a nice little marking right by that spot. Has that happened? Has that been out there?
Yeah, I mean, Cameron came out with a knockoff, where I think he called the Red X, and he had a Newport 2.6 or something like that, where they put a red dot on there, he covered the red dot. They kind of did that while SeeMore was sort of in mothballs, and I think once we got back into the business, they pulled back. So, but there are those putters out there. Nike did it with 3 dots. Odyssey did it with like a hide the red ball or something like that. So everybody at some point,
not so subtle on that one.
No. Yeah. It was clearly meant confuse, and
Sure.
we looked at it as paying tribute. It's just like, hey,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
it's a great alignment system that we have, and it's flattering that other people are doing it.
Yeah.
A couple of Ping Tour players have won tournaments with almost direct knockoffs, but Ping never would market a product like that. They're a very classy company, and I know
exactly.
They would say,
it happens on tour a lot.
They would say, they would say, hey, we require our tour players use 14 of our clubs.
Yeah.
So, but if they want to put an alignment system on there, we'll do it.
Yeah.
Okay. And so we've seen that.
Yeah.
And so again, it's all, it just validates us. I mean, our biggest problem is that we don't have enough power to spread the word. It's just such a word of mouth brand right now that we do have. I mean, I know you had a bit of a background through Club Champion and the fitting, and we do have our a really cool fitting system there.
Yeah.
And so that is the one place that golfers in the U.S. can go find a Club Champion and find our finest milled putters and a fitting system.
Yeah.
And fitting has become a much bigger thing. I mean,
100%.
People are realizing, hey, putting is 40% of the game, and why wouldn't I invest the same time and energy into lessons and fittings as I do with my driver?
Yeah, absolutely.
For years and years and years, we all said, why don't they do that? They're finally starting to do that.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting way of looking at it because, the tour has. I think the tour's influence on equipment is getting lessened as the years go on, but there's also these moments, right? Like I think the jailbird moment is the perfect one to describe because that was 100% a tour thing, right?
Yeah.
That was not a social media marketing advertising thing. That was 3 guys won with the same putter in 3 different builds at 3 different times in the hands of 3 different people, and it just hits and it's interesting. So like that tour stuff. That was kind of a setup question because I've seen those putters that are customized with something like this. But that's how tour works. If a guy needs to play a certain brand, they don't want him to leave that brand and play something else. So they're going to make adjustments to their equipment to, whether it's a straight up copy or not, they're going to do it so they keep their players. And I think there's a certain level of respect that a lot of the OEMs out there have of like, that's okay. Like we're not trying to, ruin your staff by any means, but also like, thanks for the credit of, hey, this really works and your player was dangerously close to coming over. But out there, it's such a different view than what you see on social media. And I have a hard time with that because in this trend of, the zero torque stuff and what we're seeing right now, certain content is hard to post because there's a certain subset of people that will just come after things just without the knowledge and the understanding of how these OEMs actually interact with each other and how they talk to each other and what goes on and being able to protect your business and making sure that you're protecting your tour staff and all these things that have to happen that are way beyond just, somebody copied somebody else for this, right?
Yeah.
But where is SeeMore, where do you guys see yourselves at right now? And then what would be the outlook for the future? Because I think, having spent time at Club Champion, I think that there's a lot of emphasis for people to go in and do that. I tell people all the time, you should get fit for every club in your bag. I think putter fittings are actually the most fun fitting to do because you learn more about your putting than you do getting fit for a putter, right? A lot of times with putter fittings, you learn that with putting, it's easier to have 2 options. You can either change your stroke if you're in love with the thing you have, which is not super difficult, or you can adapt something new into the stroke you already have. And I think with a putter, that's the only part of the bag that we can just snap our fingers and make that choice. But using SAM or using Quintec or using even, I do stuff with my quad, it's like the information from a putter fitting is just so cool. Like everything you get to see, it's just really, really cool. But yeah, so I guess that's the question is where are you guys at right now? I also love the fact that you guys have different, we talked about it earlier, but you guys have different neck selections. I think that's an important thing for us to talk about too, is it's not all just center shafted, reducing. But yeah, so just talk about a little where it's at and where the kind of the future is hopefully headed.
Well, I'll kind of tie together the last 2. We talked briefly about the tour and its influence with, exploding, and then the importance of fitting. And this is an interesting story. There's a kid on tour right now that's 17 years old. Okay, he's from here. Great kid. He and his dad started coming into this studio when he was 6 years old. Okay, and it was sort of a commitment for a young. At 6 years old, the dad was telling me, no, I can see it. And of course, you take that with a grain of salt.
Dad.
Because every dad says that, but this dad said it with conviction, and he's a great guy. And this kid would come back here a couple times a year for the next 7-8 years. Started winning state championships high school state championships here in the state of Tennessee using his SeeMore putter when he was in junior high.
Yeah.
Okay. He gets to high school, and all of a sudden, Callaway throws a major NIL deal at him as a high school freshman.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he's a pro right now. I'll say his name, Blades Brown.
Yeah.
Okay. Great kid. Great friend of SeeMore. Dad's a great friend. Again, he's now under a major contract, and he might be the next big thing. I mean, he's a great player and a great person, very grounded. I mean, and so, but when's the last time that happened? I mean, he's almost setting records right now, just as a 17-year-old out there, and his ability to go low.
Yeah, the last kid we had there was Jordan Spieth.
Yeah,
right?
But not at 17, I don't think. I think Jordan Spieth was 19.
He was 19,
yeah. So Jordan Spieth, I think, at least had a year of college.
Yeah.
He's a junior in high school.
Yeah.
So
crazy.
Anyway, it's a great story because he's now using their version of what he used at SeeMore.
Yeah.
But when he sees me, he's very, very gracious about giving credit.
Yeah, all the time.
Hey, Mr. Grundberg. Hey, listen, don't worry about I got here with this putter. And again, it's cool. It's not just a testimony to SeeMore, but it's a testimony to what learning from the get-go, eliminating variables. And so he's not the only. I mean, we have a lot of junior players that come in from around the country just to come to our studio.
Yeah.
So that word is getting out. It's just that for so many golfers, I mean, SeeMore is just a brand that it just doesn't come across their wavelength as often as it should.
Sure.
So, and then you talk about fittings. So yes, the club champion thing, our studio. I mean, I believe the next thing that we need to do, because our product is so effective.
Yeah.
And once somebody learns, you talked about shooting. When somebody sees that, and we call it rifle scope technology, we hold it up. Like Vaughn Taylor used to take his putter. I know we're doing too many visuals.
No, all
but
good.
he used to take his putter and he'd hold it out like that. So he'd look down the shaft. He'd take the bottom of the shaft and he'd hide the red dot, and then he'd drop it. Okay.
Yeah.
And so that's where I came up with the term rifle scope technology. It almost looked like he was going to shoot. And then he would just drop it. And so
I love that.
I think we need to get this to golfers that aren't going to Club Champion and golfers that want to get fit other places.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So one of the places that I think is available is to roll out a tech sort of fitting program where we have techs that go out to the various clubs and sign people up. I mean, the big brands do that with drivers and they do it with irons. And I think for our product, I would welcome the opportunity to do that. So I'd say where we're going, I would say that's probably the vision that I have. It would be great to take it to the golfers, because I do think as effective as a PGA Tour story is, and it sells a lot of products, but so does an effective product that helps you putt better, and 100%. You can see it. So I think we don't have to rely on, it's almost lightning in a bottle. When you have so many players that are tied to contracts, to find that right player at the right time, it can happen. It's obviously happened for us, but because we never had a player under contract. Those players that won major championships with SeeMore won them because they were looking to win.
Use it organically,
Use it organically, and I think the winners' checks that they got, I think, were quite nice. And so whether they, whatever percentage of that they attributed to their SeeMore putter, I think they felt like they were getting paid by SeeMore, right? Because they were winning.
Yeah. No, that's great. I think it's definitely a product that is so easy. It's so easy to sell when it's demoed, right? But it's not necessarily, like, I think your guys' challenge would probably be, how do you sell it for the person that's not going to demo it, or where can you put it in places where more people can just pick them up, right? Stuff like that. So no, it's cool to see, and I've been a fan of it. Like I said, ever since I got that introduction with my buddy, and then having time at Club Champion, they're pretty big advocates of it. They all know the technology there, and it's a good place to go get fit for one if you need it. But yeah, I think it's a very, very cool story. I'm excited for it. I think that the market right now is ready to help the SeeMore story, which is also like really, really cool. So yeah, I think you guys are kind of poised. And like I said, I think once people realize that there's also there's plenty of models. That's the other thing too, right? It's not just the Payne Stewart, Zach Johnson model.
No.
That's a big deal.
We have the Mini Giants series, which we haven't talked specifically, but the Mini Giants I would say take a look at, because the Mini Giants have been out really a long time, as long as Lab has been out, right? And it's and then people again that use the Mini Giants, what they love about the Mini Giants is that they're everything that SeeMore has always been, but a little bit better, because they're a little bit bigger, a little bit softer, they feel a little bit better, they're a little bit more stable. Even the shaft is a little bit fatter, and so our rifle scope is a little bit easier to see. And so, and if you look at those, we have 5 models in that, and they, again, you bring up lab because again, lab is sort of a new reference point
you
right
sort of
now
have to,
for what people are hearing about, and they're learning about this. And I think one of the reasons we're doing so fantastic with Club Champion is because I think they believe in testing. And so you come in, you're looking for something. Well, here, look at this as well. So,
absolutely.
And the mini giants are sort of, if you look again, here's, we have, you can see the beautiful work, 100% milled, copper inlays. The feeling is unbelievable. The balance is the stability. And then this is part of our fitting system here. So it's kind of cool. You'll go in and it's kind of an air hose type setup, and you can mix and match. And so if you go to a Club Champion, we got different ways that, golfers can really get fit for our product.
Super easy.
Yeah, in terms of the specs and then in terms of finding the head that works the best for them. But we think they're forgiving and they offer all the benefits that anybody else out there has.
Yeah.
They're also really good looking.
They look cool.
And that's important because we do think golfers, historically, if something that's hot is also very extreme looking, right?
Yeah.
Something that's really extreme. Everybody's going to have a bad putting round. I mean, it just happens.
It happens. We all get it. Yeah.
And the more extreme looking your product is, I think, the more likely you are to put it on the sideline. Because if you're not putting well, at least you want it to look good.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
So as crazy as that sounds, I've seen that in all my years of putter marketing. That if you get something that's too extreme, it can be great when it's hot, but then when it gets cold,
it gets shelved the right way. It takes a back seat.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sitting down. I really appreciate it. I think we're gonna go through a fit here too, and then I'll probably talk to Alex. We'll get some putters out and do some more SeeMore content just so I can keep showing them to you guys. But thanks again for sitting down.
Man, I really appreciate
this is great.
it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I
It's
appreciate
been fun talking. Yeah,
awesome.
absolutely.
Right. That's it, guys, for this one. Listen to all the other podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, you made it this far. Thank you. Feel free to subscribe. And then if you're on Spotify or anywhere else you're listening to it, thanks for listening. And I think you can rate on the audio versions. So do that if we please too. But that's it for this one. We'll see you next time with Made for English Podcast.